What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Now, 2 weeks removed from Sony announcing them winding down physical game production for Blu-rays post-January 2028, the backlash has continued. It really has not let up at all. And apparently we're getting to a position where even some partners with Sony are getting kind of frustrated around the situation, but we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Sony and an announcement that's actually frustrated the anime community through Crunchyroll, who are also now getting involved with the whole physical media discussion. And we have Nintendo, kind of off on their own, doing their own thing as usual. But in this case, an interesting piece of hardware may have leaked out that makes a lot of sense as they work to bridge the gap through this cross-gen period with the Switch 1 and the Switch 2, but we'll go over all of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Also, we are on Spotify now, video and audio. I have it linked down below in the description. We're actually building up followers there, so I do appreciate everyone who's taking the time to go over and check it out. But if you are new there, like, comment, subscribe, follow, whatever else happens there. But we are going to start today with a new announcement for a collaboration here. We can see this is over on Business Wire with a press release saying Hasbro, a leading games IP and toy company, today announced a new licensing partnership with Nintendo to create products based on the popular Legend of Zelda franchise. This multi-year collaboration is set to begin in 2027, starting with the first reveals of 3 6-inch scale figures at San Diego Comic-Con. That will be next week, they say July 23rd to the 26th. And I mean, this makes a lot of sense as Nintendo is working to, of course, more so merchandise and set things up for the movie, Legend of Zelda movie that's next year. I'm kind of curious what these first few figures will be. You assume Link, Zelda, Ganon, I guess. There are some obvious ones they would pull from there. So it'll be interesting at least to see the quality and, again, the direction when it comes to this partnership that is multi-year, but probably starting to align not only with the big game release that'll be happening with Ocarina of Time remake later this year, but clearly with the movie that will be hitting the mainstream in a big way next year. Also, we had a surprise release from Square Enix with Star Ocean, the second story R for the Switch 2. Not really a Switch 2 edition, just a Switch 2 release, because it's Square Enix, and you can see, now this is over on Nintendo Life. The game is retailing on the eShop right now, $49.99. And unfortunately, like Octopath Traveler 1 and 2 that we just talked about, no upgrade path. So if you already have it on the Switch, you'll have to rebuy it on the Switch 2 for that $50 price. And your save data won't carry over. So I don't know what is going on here with Square Enix when it comes to this. It's just very odd. Now, the upgrades seem to be, the frame rate will be 60, because on the Switch 1, I mean, they got the game on there. It was kind of crunchy. I mean, look, they made it work, but clearly it's going to be better experience here. 60 frames per second. They also appear to have it set at 1080p in docked mode for Star Ocean. I think that art style plays into even that resolution pretty well there. So it's very unfortunate the way that Square Enix has been treating some of these releases. I really do think they have to at least consider upgrades pretty consistently. And if nothing else, I mean, come on, your save data can't carry over. So I don't know what's going on over Square Enix. If you haven't played this game, it's good, but if you already have it on the Switch 1, I don't know if I'd recommend buying it again just on the Switch 2. It just seems very odd. Oh, and here's good news for Xbox fans who are hoping to see Dispatch make its way over to the platform. We have a release date on it, and we can see. Now, this was announced over on their social media account saying Dispatch is coming to Xbox. All caps, by the way, Xbox, on July 29th. I mean, the game is good. It's now on just about everything, I think, now. And so it's a game that I enjoyed quite thoroughly. It was also a game that I played a while ago. They also mentioned it's on Xbox Cloud. So I think this would work fine as a cloud-based game. I feel like, I mean, there's nothing crazy going on in terms of quick twitch movement or reaction time. It does get a little dicey sometimes based on some of the gameplay interactions where you have to dispatch people around, but I think for the most part you should be able to handle it well even through cloud streaming. But the game is fun, fully recommend it, so check it out later on this month on Xbox. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Sony, who did announce July 1st that starting in 2028 they'd be winding down production and manufacturing for Blu-ray discs that they would use for PlayStation games. And it seems pretty obvious that PS6 is going to be heavily leaning into just digital. Could be a disc drive, like for backwards compatibility with physical games, we're still not sure on that. All we know for sure is that that's the direction Sony's going in starting January 2028. The backlash has been crazy and overwhelming online, and it seems like right now Sony, who has said nothing about the elephant in the room, is kind of hoping it dies down. But it hasn't. It's still going every single time they post anything on social media. There is a pending community note, because I can see the community notes. I'll vote on them at times. I can see it. And it's every single time. All right. And then on top of that, the comments are overwhelming, typically just outweighing any likes or retweets, anything like that. And you do wonder, at one point, it's like, okay, there's a lot of exposure for every single game we show off. But it starts to get to the point of, man, no one's talking about the game that's being shown here. They're all just yelling at Sony about physical games and how it seems like they're going away from that in like a year and a half or so. Okay, so with that in mind, it seems like some of the developers maybe behind the scenes are taking note of this and even becoming kind of frustrated because it's not free to have Sony tweet about your game. That costs money. Typically, there's some kind of marketing deal, usually thousands, tens of thousands of dollars even, depending on the contracts with even smaller titles, let alone potentially millions and millions of dollars with contracts for big-time games, AAA, like Grand Theft Auto 6 or whatever else, right? Okay, well, one game I noticed, and this you can even see is over on Push Square, Densha Attack was getting kind of beaten up, I will admit, and there were some people who were kind of defending it, like, hold on a minute, guys, hold on. The game's good. Maybe buy it somewhere else if you need to. Like, they were trying to, basically people are trying to push others into buying it on systems that aren't the PlayStation 5, basically. Now, I did check out Densha Attack. I actually checked it out on the Xbox, and you know what, the game is actually pretty awesome. And I saw some people have some comparisons to Dreamcast games, like that era. It feels like that. I don't know if it's the visuals that look very, very sharp. The game itself is zany and weird and crazy and over the top. It does kind of scream early 2000s generation, and it is a lot of fun. It also has some, I wasn't expecting that necessarily, has some Tony Hawk Pro Skater thrown in there. I mean, seriously, you have different objectives as you're going through this on-rail section where you're jumping around all over the place. You're doing what look like skateboard tricks, and you use the right stick, kind of like Skate, to do it. Really, really cool and imaginative game. But people are basically quote tweeting PlayStation, do not play this on PlayStation 5 over and over and over again. And you know what? Again, a smaller game. This isn't GTA 6. So any of these smaller, you could say indie titles, which Densha Attack's like $20. I think on PC it was on sale for like 20% off or something. These are games that, you know, when they do a deal like this with PlayStation, it's a big deal for them. It's like, hey, we got that, we're getting that exposure for a game that, you know, it's hard for it to stand out because a lot of people just turn on their system and play Fortnite. This is a game I'd like to see more people play because it genuinely stands out in the marketplace if you put it in front of people. Now, with that in mind, Sony also did release a new Wolverine trailer, and I've been kind of curious if something like a big Wolverine game would be able to overcome the overwhelming amount of comments. And no, in the comments section on YouTube, it's all about physical media or frustration against Sony or them moving away from physical. It's a whole thing, right? So that hasn't worked well there. And then, of course, Sony just can't, they have to outdo themselves. Now the entire anime community is getting involved with this because it appears that Crunchyroll is, let's take a look. Okay, so this is over on Crunchyroll's store. Now again, Sony owns Crunchyroll. They say this August, we are transitioning the Crunchyroll store to a brand new shopping experience that will be available exclusively for Mega and Ultimate fans. That's a subscription service through Crunchyroll that, to my understanding, ranges like $15 to $20 somewhere in there for either one. The new store captures the excitement of convention-exclusive merchandise, collectibles, curated drops, and limited release products inspired by the anime series you love. But before the new experience launches, we're celebrating with a summer sale with 50% off select items beginning July 14th. So I will admit, I haven't bought anything really physical anime shows, whatever else on Crunchyroll. But I see a lot of people frustrated with this. And you know what? I empathize with people who maybe really enjoy an anime series. And then guess what happens more times than not on some of these subscription services? You can see Anime Rave points out Black Lagoon has been removed from Crunchyroll following the expiration of its streaming license. This happens a lot. And it's something that Crunchyroll has been heavily criticized on is like, man, these anime series that just get pulled down randomly because of these licensing issues. And what happens when that takes place? Well, you can see like in some of the comments, people are just posting their physical collection on Blu-ray for their different anime series, like in this case, the Black Lagoon. So I actually ran into this myself with Dragon Ball Battle of the Gods, right? And it was a movie that I thought was a lot of fun, and I figured the kids, is getting a little older, hey, why don't you check this movie out? You know, I think it's an enjoyable time. It moves fast enough, and I couldn't find it anywhere, like for streaming. I'm like, who has the streaming on this? And I couldn't seem to find it. So then I started looking around and actually buying the thing, and so yes, I do see why people would be frustrated at the idea of Crunchyroll, Sony owned, moving away from physical media because they're going to do a store locked behind their subscription service. That just plays into FOMO, and I think it lets them shrink down a lot of their just on-hand space, so like warehouse space, and then also charge more money for really anything they're selling. But now Sony has the ire of the gaming community, who's all like for physical media, and the anime community, who's about physical media. So they're just making enemies all over the place, which is so weird because it seems like all of this could have been avoided by Sony just letting the market kind of take care of itself, at least on the gaming side. Another generation, just the way it was trending, yeah, maybe it would have bottomed out single digits and they kind of move on. I don't really know about the anime community when it comes to physical media. It seems like many of them still really like it. And I see why with the subscription services, but if nothing else, Sony probably could have bypassed a lot of this by just going another generation for the PlayStation 6, at least supporting physical media. I'm very curious if Sony ends up saying something here because it's not dying down, I think, to the degree that Sony was hoping, where they kind of bulldozed the whole situation. This appears like something they'll be dealing with for quite some time. Next up, let's talk about a patent that seems to be pointing to a piece of hardware for Nintendo with the Switch 1 and the Switch 2, and I do kind of think this is something that's going to come to fruition if it's not already being manufactured, to be honest. And like we can see, this is over on Nintendo Patents Watch. It says a Nintendo patent published in China describes a Switch 2 dock that can also support Switch 1 console. Since Switch 2 and Switch 1 handle the power delivery negotiation differently, the dock can recognize which console is connected. So there's all kinds of diagrams here, but like for the Switch 2 console, USB 3 data standard versus USB 2 data standard for the Switch 1. Of course, difference in terms of overall video output with resolution, 4K for the Switch 2, 1080p for the Switch 1, but then also that fan. So we've actually talked about this in the teardown, and we were trying to figure out, it's been going back and forth, does the fan actually work to cool the system at all? Well, technically in the patent, they do describe the fan as actually cooling the device. All right, so I'm curious about maybe a new dock where they would work to implement that further so that the Switch 2 can at least get more cooling, as the Switch 1 just doesn't really need the cooling as much, obviously. So the fan will lower RPM with the Switch 1, but then speed up for the Switch 2 here. And I think this would be... It's kind of a shame in my mind that this wasn't their initial strategy. I think it will be eventually. I think we will probably see some sort of dock get introduced because right now Nintendo technically is manufacturing 2 different docks, and they could save in plenty of money, I'm sure, just making a single dock that they sell. And sure, the dock itself isn't cheap. It's more than $100, right? But if it has multifunctionality in a household where the idea being you can go around to different TVs and it doesn't matter if it's a Switch 1 or a Switch 2, the dock will figure it out and then display the correct resolution, the power delivery, USB transfer speeds, all of that. That feels convenient enough where someone might go, oh, I don't need to buy 2 different docks and hook up which one I need, maybe, because there are people with, again, families. Remember, Nintendo wanted to be a multi-Switch per household. That was their plan. So there are many Switch 1s, I'm sure, still floating around in households that have a Switch 2. This makes a ton of sense, and it's kind of a shame that that wasn't the plan, like day 1 for the Switch 2. So maybe that's something that, again, we see here. I'd say maybe pretty soon. I wouldn't be shocked if by the end of the year, we're talking about a new dock being introduced, and Nintendo maybe just randomly announces it one day, but just randomly on social media. But this would work to let them filter down some of their manufacturing lines and set it up so they just make one dock as opposed to 2 and try to guess how many of either that they need. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a Final Fantasy game coming up here later this fall that, man, I think looks really good. And they've been showing more and more of this, that being Square Enix. And in fact, they put out a whole new trailer for it, and they put out a big write-up with new details, and that's Final Fantasy Resonance. All right, it has the HD 2D look to it, and according to Square, it's like the first big Final Fantasy game that will be doing that. But like some of the trailer here, I also have some of the details we'll go over real quick. Now the main story is, they say about 30 to 40 hours, almost double that though for completion. So there's a lot to do in this game. Again, they are kind of positioning it as more of a main, I guess, kind of Final Fantasy game, not necessarily just a smaller side project. 26 visions, and the visions they've kind of shown off with Cloud as an example where it switches over and shows a cutscene of him. But these are like crystallized essences of legendary heroes, as they put it. And you can unlock different vision abilities as you strengthen your bond, and the idea being you equip one of these visions, and I guess they fight alongside your character and grow with them. Okay, so kind of a, I guess, pulling a little bit there from, say, the job system or something, somewhat. They did show some new screenshots, by the way, of different visions. So I did see Squall was in there, Zidane, Tidus, and then a few others. They also have Esper summons, so they have to kind of, I guess, differentiate these, where you have visions that felt kind of like summons, but then you have the actual summons, okay? So Ifrit, Shiva, Titan, Odin, those are some that they name there, and then there are a few others. And they have fast travel unlocked very early in the game. I mean, they've shown an airship basically the whole way through. So I kind of feel like you're going to get that like almost right away. And then they have 3 difficulty levels: casual, normal, or expert. So you'll have to see trophy lists, achievements, whatever else there to see if you need to play through on expert to get like 100% completion there. And the thing I was really excited to see, several ultimate weapons are in the game to collect. That's always the fun part about Final Fantasy, at least to me, is getting to a position where you can kind of break the game by becoming too powerful. You know, breaking the damage limit in something like Final Fantasy X, where you have the ultimate weapons and you've completed the sphere grid and you're just like melting different enemies. So it's always ultimate weapons, but then multi-hit like moves. So I'm hoping that's also something they have, but having several ultimate weapons you can collect and then go back through parts of the game and just annihilate stuff is a ton of fun. Becoming overpowered in a Final Fantasy game that lasts, they say, up to 80 hours for completionists, I think is gonna be a great time. Really looking forward to this one. It looks like super high quality too, with the HD 2D like in mind, and it's coming out October 22nd. So I'm gonna keep an eye on this one because I'm having a lot of fun, at least just going through some of the details leading up to its release. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you bought a Blu-ray movie or TV series in the last year? 54% say yes, 46% say no. All right, so I have wondered if that is kind of making a bit of a comeback here when it comes to like physical movies or specifically TV series, because all this stuff is so touch and go with a lot of these streaming services. You see one streaming service lose access to it through licensing or contracts, then another one picks it up, and then you're kind of just like subscription hopping almost. So I kind of understand why people out there may go, you know what, I really like this anime. I'm just gonna buy the Blu-ray and I don't have to deal with, oh, where is it next year if I wanna rewatch the series. And, I've thought about that more and more as we go along, if there will be subscription fatigue for Netflix or Hulu or Crunchyroll. Because, yeah, it can be kind of frustrating looking around and realizing, man, do I just have to be subscribed to all of these different subscription services to keep up with this? Because I kind of figured cutting the cord meant that things would have gotten cheaper and easier, and it's kind of going the opposite way now. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Boss Fight, who says, with discs, if it breaks or is lost, that's on the user. With digital accounts, if it's hacked or lost, it's typically on the platform. People are okay with losing things on their own terms, not when it's entirely out of their autonomy. People were still annoyed, by the way, when discs would get scratched, and so we were at the game store back in the day. We had a disc resurfacing setup, and it was good because if you had a $60 game at the time, say on the 360, it was $5 to resurface and generally fix most scratches. I mean, if the game's cracked, you remember the inner ring crack that would happen on the 360 and it goes out into like the data? Not much you can do about that. But there was at least a way to fix that to a degree. But with digital platforms where everything's tied to an account, as you see, it's quite fragile. And it's weird that even security measures that should be in place aren't. and it ends up being an automated scenario where you're dealing with not even a person nowadays, you're dealing with AI that's being set up for customer service, and you just locked out and you can't do anything about it. And it's like, I have tens of thousands of dollars worth of purchases tied to it. I feel like there should be much better security or customer service attached to this. So I just think there's a lot of stuff that has to be figured out before we go into I guess an era for gaming where it's nothing but digital, because right now it just seems like none of these companies are prepared for it. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you want to hear more about this Sony situation with physical media as it continues to truck along online. We did a whole reaction to it over on ClickR3, and I'll leave that right below. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.